We arrived in San Salvador, the capital of El Salvador, last night, and today we're exploring. We've joined this walking tour and we've come to the historic centre of the city. This is the main plaza with the cathedral up ahead. That building there is the National Palace, where the government were based. They moved to a more discreet location in 1974 during the height of the Civil War. Safety concerns. We're going to have a look inside the National Library. This building was a gift from China. We get a good view of the plaza and the cathedral from here. This is the Iglesia del Calvario. It's almost completely constructed of metal. Actually, there are a few buildings in a city like this one that were flat-packed, created in Europe and shipped across. It doesn't look metal, but if you tap it, you can tell it definitely is. This is the main shopping street in San Salvador. Until very recently, it was a complete no-go area. In 2022, the current far-right government of El Salvador cracked down on the gangs, arresting anyone with the wrong clothes or gang tattoos. They rounded up around 60,000 young men mainly, put them in a high-security terrorism jail for life. And it's a pretty extreme method of doing it. It has made the streets a lot safer. Main Street used to be full of market stalls, but the government have created this indoor centre for them all now. This is all part and parcel of cleaning up the city. The guide was saying that you would see dead bodies on the street quite frequently before, whereas you don't now. Although people are really happy, it's much safer. You don't really get a sense of optimism in the country. People are generally fairly scared of the government. Certainly don't want to say anything negative about it. It's a bit of a strange feeling, to be honest. This is a really famous church in San Salvador. It's called El Rosario. It was designed to be a bit more humble, less opulent than most of the churches around here. The outside looks fairly ugly, doesn't it? But the inside is really quite amazing. You have to come at the right time of day, and actually the right time of the year. So we're here just before midday, which is when you can see most of the lights. I think it'd be even better if we come midsummer. This is the last stop for us today, Parque Cuscatlan. It's a really pretty park, actually. We've come here to see this monument to memory and truth. It's got the names of 30,000 people who died or were disappeared during the Civil War. Since it was built, they've found more people, more graves. 75,000 names now, but the list is still growing. The Civil War took place between 1979 and 92. Sounds just absolutely brutal. We wanted to understand a bit more about the Civil War, so today we've come to this place called Uzapa, which is a couple of hours north of San Salvador. Our guide, Freddie, is just taking us a little bit further in his 4x4. Freddie was actually a resistance fighter, part of the guerrilla army during the war. He fought in this area, which used to be a small village. This first spot that Freddie's brought us to was the scene of a massacre by the government forces. This event is what led Freddie to decide to become a resistance fighter in the first place, because the government forces just killed pretty indiscriminately men, women, children. It was a close-knit community here, and Freddie had to witness members of his family being killed. He was 18 at the time. We're just skirting around the edge of a volcano, which is also called Guazapa. You get a nice view from up here. We've seen a few of these shelters around here. Both the villagers and the resistance would hide out here whilst the government sent surveillance planes overhead. It's hard to believe this used to be a village up until the 80s, but there are about 500 people living here, 120 households or so. This is where the local school would have been. All that remains is slightly raised earthen banks. And another shelter over there. It was a highly unequal war. They think 85% of deaths were carried out by the government, backed by the US, and that their strategy actually was to terrorise the population. In other words, carry out completely indiscriminate killings. This area here is where the field hospital was. These are the beds. I don't suppose they had any trained medical staff. I mean, most of the fighters were just kids, some as young as 13, and all made up of the local very poor and poorly educated population. A big factor behind the war was the extreme levels of inequality in the country, stemming from colonial times. And it was also triggered by a military coup and resistance to that. Well, that was really interesting chatting to Freddie, although I do get the sense he's still a bit reticent talking about it. Though the rebels did overthrow the government is still very much in charge. And I think people are still a bit scared to talk about what happened. Well, today we've just come out for a hike, or rather a hike and a bit of a swim. We've just driven about an hour to the east of San Salvador, this huge lake called Lake Lopango. When I looked at this walk online, I hadn't realised that you started at quite an altitude above the lake. Bit of a surprise, really. Started the walks about a kilometre up from the lake. Not very far distance-wise. Anyway, I guess it does mean that you get these wonderful views on the way down. The path is nice and shaded, but I think we're still going to be so hot coming back up again. Oh, well, this is really lovely, and there's not a soul about. We saw a group of people earlier getting a lift in a jeep back up to the top. Apart from that, we haven't seen a soul. The water is crystal clear and full of tadpoles. The water's really warm, which is surprising because it's 30 metres deep in places. It is lovely to swim in there. Feels very clean. As you might have suspected, this is actually a caldera. Surprising, since San Salvador is just covered with volcanoes. Well, as I suspected, it was pretty thirsty work coming back up that hill. Just so happens there's this really nice restaurant right at the top. So we're going to have a drink and a bite to eat before we head back. Today we're heading to a small town called Panchimalco, which is a little southeast of San Salvador. And this is it. We've just parked up and we're just going to have a little wander around. It's certainly a really pretty little town. It's actually known for its indigenous population. The main group here are called Pipils. They're closely related to the Aztecs. Migrated here from Mexico originally. The noise of children you can hear is the school behind us. Can't really see in because of the wall, but you can certainly hear it. This is one of the oldest surviving colonial churches in El Salvador. Dates to 1725, so not all that old, obviously. You can see why this town's become a bit of a tourist attraction. Get wonderful views from the cemetery. It does look pretty packed though. There's graves even in the pathway here. Well, I think that's it. We've wandered pretty much every street in the centre of the town. It's not very big. Just going to head back to the market we spotted earlier. Have pupusa, which this town is also famous for.
I have to say this pupusa is delicious. It's stuffed with beans and cheese, and it's got a kind of a pickled cabbage with red sauce on top. Absolutely delicious.
Well, we really enjoyed our time in San Salvador. We actually did do a few things I didn't film. Museums and things like that. Saw some friends. Not so interesting to film. Anyway, we're starting a road trip today, contents of which will be the subject of my next video.